Good morning. Make sure the microphone is on because I'm always messing that up. So this really was, as Mike and I were discussing before service started, this one was a stretch. And I'm not made of rubber, so it was a little difficult. I also want to acknowledge, tell me your mom's name again. Carol Jean, Deanne, and who is the Laurel. So for all of the sharing of love and the presencing our ancestors. When we presence them, when we speak of them, when we keep them present, then they are. And likewise, when we don't, they get away from us. Not purposely, but they just do, because it's not top of mind. So this idea of belief, when I went to my primary source, which is Merriam-Webster, there are these three definitions or three parts of this definition of the idea of what a belief is or how it can inhabit. One is that it's a state or habit of mind, a state or habit of mind in which trust or confidence is placed in something or some person. So it is an exercise of the mind, if you will. It's a state or a habit of the mind that you put trust in or that you have confidence in that is. It just is because you believe it to be so. Because you have trust in it and confidence. Those are the behaviors, those are the experiences. Something that is accepted, considered to be true, or held as an opinion is another definition of belief. So, if you will, a little less certainty, a little less kind of like rock solid, yeah, this is the way that is, but it's really more the three of us got together and we think that this is kind of the way it should go, and we consider it to be true. And we may have convinced some other people that it's true. So then it becomes a belief. And then the last one is the conviction of the truth of some statement or the reality of some being or phenomenon. The conviction of the truth of some statement. That you get to a place where you are convicted that this is the truth. The truth of some statement or the reality of some being or phenomenon. Divine mind, God, etc., etc. That you have come to that this is the reality of some being or phenomenon, especially when based on examination of evidence. That you look in your life, you look over the course of your life, you look at the interactions that you have with people, and you look at what worked, what didn't work. You look at the times when you thought you were going to just shatter into a million pieces, and you look at the times when there was joy that you didn't even have language for. And with all of that, you come to a conviction of some truth about a reality of some being or a phenomenon. So the evidence is not necessarily presented to you. The evidence is your own examination of your own life. All of this can comprise what we think of from the perspective of belief and living a spiritual life. You might be getting a sense of why this was a little difficult for me. Because belief is part of an ecosystem. We generally, and I know it's the theme for the month, but we sometimes think about belief as an entity unto itself, not necessarily connected to this broader network, this far more intricate network of what we call spiritual life. That there is what we believe, but before we believe it, we sometimes think it. So we think something, and then we come to believe it, and then there is a knowing. That if we believe something and see evidence for it long enough, that we come to know certain things to be so. That it's no longer a matter of believing that it should be a particular way, but we come to know something. And then after knowing, there is actually the experience where we become. So in the moment that we know, and the longer we know something, we then become that. And there is no more questioning about it until the question comes. So I want to offer 3 questions for your consideration. One is, and I like this question, and I want to say that for me, I believe that I'm given things to say, not that I'm saying them. Does that make sense? Yes. So that's why I say I like this question, because I know I didn't come up with it. The question is, what beliefs do you have that you trust? Because you can have a lot of beliefs, but not trust them. Not actually have confidence in them. Those are the ones where somebody asks you a question about, well, what is New Thought Spiritual Center? And you're kind of like, oh, well, it's kind of like, well, you should just come and experience it for yourself. So what beliefs do you have that you trust? Or another way of thinking about this is, what beliefs are you betting on? Like you've got some beliefs and you're just hoping that that's really like worth putting some time and energy into. Like hopefully that's going to carry the day. The second question is, what beliefs are you accepting as true? So beliefs that you have that you may not necessarily be working on, beliefs that you have that you're kind of like, yeah, well, that sounds good. That sounds like it could be that way. But there's not an interaction with the belief. You're believing it because other people believe it. And sometimes somewhere hanging out in the background is really a question of, do I really believe that? But I'm not kind of yet ready to deal with that, and certainly not ready to deal with it publicly, so I'm just going to be quiet and pretend that I believe it, or just not challenge it for right now. And then the last question is, what evidence do you have for what you believe? Not what I say, not what the prayer chaplains say, not what your mother says, not what your children say, not what the butcher who you trust so well to give you a good cut of meat, not what other people say, but what evidence do you have for your beliefs? And how are those beliefs actually the foundation of your spiritual walk? So those are 3 simple questions. Real easy stuff. And still kind of continuing with this idea of the myth of, or the myth of belief. And I finally got kind of like the subtitle to this idea of the myth of belief is really part and whole. Because sometimes we believe in part, and belief is a wholeness unto itself, and it is part of a larger system. So there's that. So the first myth that I want to talk a little bit about is that we count on our beliefs as the truth. We count on them. Like we really count on our beliefs as the truth. And there can be a bit of separation between are beliefs and the truth, as in ultimate truth, divine mind, God. So we can have beliefs, but then somehow there's this separation between what I believe and the actual experience of the divine. We spend a whole lot of time defending our beliefs. Do you notice that you sometimes spend a whole lot of time defending what you believe? Sometimes to your very self. Like in the car. Amazing, you haven't driven off the road yet. But we spend a lot of time defending our beliefs, challenging beliefs that we don't agree with that other people have, protecting our beliefs. Even in the moment when we start to not believe something, we then start to protect the idea of it, even though we're challenging it ourselves. And then trying to dismiss beliefs that we don't agree with. So not only do we hold our own beliefs, but we spend a lot of energy trying to dispel beliefs that other people have that are not in alignment with ours. We talk a lot about kind of like the fracturing that's going on and, all the discord in the country, but primarily we're talking about people challenging beliefs about things and about the way things should go and who should be included and all of this kind of stuff. But it's not so much that we're actually looking to share what we believe in some kind of spiritual container. We're really just trying to dispel different kinds of beliefs. We're not always in concert with spirit when we're in this process of trying to figure out what we believe. And in many instances, our humanity is actually choosing what we believe as opposed to that connection to the divine. So if I'm connected to the divine, if I am and all of us, if we are the divine expressed in human form, if we are directly connected, all of us, then the conversations that are happening, how could we be having that conversation? How do we sustain that? Right? How could we possibly believe we say that we are divinely connected and we're willing for people not to have the same rights? We won't take care of the environment. They're just things that we won't agree on. So how is that? Because we're not all believing the same thing. And whatever it is you believe, in the moment you believe it, will be so. There is this idea that we sometimes have that, like, I can kind of believe this thing and there'll be no penalty for that. There's no blowback from it. And you can believe for a moment that, I just wish my sister would shut up. Wish she would just shut up. If she would just stop talking foolishness all the time. And then all of a sudden you don't hear from her for 3 months. And then get mad. Who does she think she is not calling me for 3 months after all I do for the family? But you've got to kind of discern who's choosing what you believe. Is it you kind of like in your humanity, or is it you in the full awareness of your connection with the divine? Who's choosing what you believe? Are you gathering evidence for a connection and a life lived in terms of connecting with spirit, or are you choosing a life and choosing beliefs based on something happened when you were 6 and you never want that to happen again, so you've got this fear-based construction of what you believe? Easy stuff. The second myth is that your beliefs are actually yours. And I think that there's something for us to deal with in life in terms of the beliefs we've been given, the beliefs that have been kind of like laid out for us, and then what do you believe? When I was young and going to church, God was a white man with a beard, hanging out in heaven with white angels, with a white son that got crucified, that we all believed upon. And then there was, all of this kind of study that came out and the development of the Black Power movement. And, well, if it was in Egypt, then how can he look like that? And so there was that whole thing. Then everybody became black. Trying to be kind of like culturally responsible and appropriate, but maybe not South Sudan, not Southern, because we're talking about the northern part. So maybe there's some flexibility there, right? Because they're, colonizing the whole continent. They weren't just colonizing, you know what I'm saying? So then I started believing some other stuff. And then I read The Color Purple by Alice Walker. And the character of Shug talking about trying to get rid of the white man in her head that she thought was God, and walking by a field of the color purple, or walking by a field and seeing the color purple and seeing that as God. And then I believed that. And so our belief systems are influenced by a great deal, move a great deal over the course of our lives, but to say that they're solely yours and to not acknowledge all of the influences on what you believe is a little egomaniacal. Like we might be taking a little bit of agency with a very human experience that we may not be spending enough spiritual time on. Because if you take all of this and then put it into, if I take all of those experiences I've had and then put them into the experience that I directly and uniquely have with God in all of its expressions, then there's some other stuff that shows up. And we've got to be open to that. We've got to be open, excuse me, to the exploration. We have to be willing to acknowledge that process of you think something and then you believe it, and the longer you believe it, you come to know it. And the prayer chaplains, stand up for a second, just so people can see you. The prayer chaplains will know something for you when you stop believing it. That is what they do. They will know something. They won't even believe, they will know it as so. Not until you can believe it for yourself and until you can know it for yourself. Does that make sense? Thank you. And the longer you know it, then you be it. You become it. It's no longer a question of whether you believe it or who told you, or you then are peace. You are joy. You are comfort. You are protection. You are health. You just are. There's no getting to anymore. The last thing that I'm going to share is this last myth of that you are your beliefs. That you are your beliefs. You just are. And Ernest Holmes said this, that when talking about beliefs, it was important to separate the belief from the believer. That there is a difference between the belief and the believer. The person, the entity, the divine expression that is believing in real time something. He says attraction and repulsion are mental qualities and may be consciously utilized for definite purposes. And I'm updating this because there's a little sexism in Holmes' writing as well. Because of the time, because of where it was, people automatically and according to law attract from without the correspondences of their inner mental attitudes. So if you're not aware of what's going on in your inner mental attitudes, you're going to attract stuff anyway. And then you're kind of like, why has all this stuff happened to me? Mind your thoughts. Think back. What were you thinking? What was your inner mental attitude? And then all of a sudden, it kind of like, oh, that's why. He goes on to say that inner mental attitudes may be induced through right thinking and correct knowing. The subjective state of thought is the power always at work. It is the result of the sum total of all beliefs, consciously or unconsciously held. And you don't get to be irresponsible because you don't remember thinking it. It is the sum total of the all of it. And so that is separating the belief from the believer. Because if you will, the believer, the witness, is the part of you that is beyond your humanity that can actually be observing all of this happening without judgment, without persecution, just actually noticing, oh, so that's what we're doing now? Okay. Let me send a message up. Maybe we could do something different. It is that piece. The believer is that which is most directly connected to the divine, is that which is connected beyond the veil. The believer, not the belief. The belief may give you access to your inner believer, but the believer was always there. Last point. I actually may have already made the last point. I moved some stuff from the end up front. Didn't even realize. But I will say this as really a last point. I think one of the places as you continue this study this month and probably again, throughout the year whenever it shows up, when you stop believing, you have to interact with that as a temporary moment. You have to interact with that temporarily. We were having a conversation last night at dinner about the relationship between belief and faith. And how are they the same and how are they different? When I think about faith, I'm always mindful of an expression of faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So when thinking about faith, belief is kind of like what we can grab onto, what we can discern, what we can experience. Faith is when your beliefs fail you, when you have no reason, there's no evidence that you should believe something. That's what faith is. Part of an intricate network. And so, as the song says, keep on believing. And as you believe, you will know. And as you know, you will be. Thank you so much. God bless you.